I know, it seems weird to see me in a red blazer, and it seems strange to be hearing Christmas music in July when everybody's wondering if their air conditioner is set on just the right temperature. But I couldn't help but wonder this week, what if we led our lives based on what was spiritually necessary for those lives rather than social convention? Because by social convention, this is not the time to be speaking of Christmas. And when Walmart puts out their Christmas decorations in September, we grimace and make a sour face because they're putting up the Christmas decorations too early. But what if we allowed our lives to be dictated by what we need spiritually instead of by social convention? Because you see, we learn something, that there are moments in our lives when we have to decide to do something. That is, nobody will give us permission to do it unless we decide to do it. Why does a person eat right? Why does a person exercise and try to do healthy things? Well, your doctor might tell you it's a good idea. But what we know is at a gut level, unless we make the conscious decision to do it, very few people will knock on our door and say, you know, you haven't been exercising enough. You should really take some time and go for a run. Why does a person go on vacation and take self-care and take care of themselves? Because at some gut level, they realize that they are not as healthy or good at the things they do spiritually, emotionally, or otherwise unless they take time for themselves. But many of us know if we have worked long hours in a job, very rarely does a boss come and say, you should take more time for yourself. You need to take a little more vacation. Take it easy. No, generally, we don't go on vacation until we decide that we are going to do it and that we are going to make time for ourselves. And even though we know that vacation makes sense or self-care makes sense, there are some people who love to brag about how many sick days they've never used or how many vacation days they've left on the table when they retire. There's a pride in the fact of never taking a day off. And the reality is a day off never comes until we do it. What if Mary is asking us, won't you ponder all that happened? Won't you come to it again and again? Because based on the translation of the text that you read, it says that Mary treasured all of these words and pondered them in her heart. And I have this notion that she just didn't ponder them once, but that it was an ongoing thing in the space of her life because it was such a holy and amazing moment. And make no mistake, this is a story that we can come back to again and again, and in fact we need to come back to it, not just in December, but even on warm days in July. Note again what is happening in the beginning of this story. The angelic visitors are going to these shepherds and telling them and unfolding this good news to them. These shepherds are going to be heralds of the good news. And because it is the story, we nod our head and say, yes, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. But consider for a moment that this is fundamentally a new and a different thing. That in nowhere but this story would the shepherds have been given that kind of role, that kind of privilege, that kind of honor, that kind of large role. Shepherds at that time, we think of gentle pastoral scenes. No. They were viewed as being dirty. They were dismissed. They were unseen people who tended to dirty animals. So poorly thought of, they were not allowed to testify in court. Their word wasn't considered good enough to be listened to in court. These were the bottom of the barrel. Shepherds were viewed as itinerant, rough and ready people who were kind of going hither and yon, and you never knew where a shepherd might wind up, so why would you trust them anyway? So in this moment, this holy moment, the shepherds are getting to bring the good news. The shepherds who have never been listened to before. The shepherds who have never been considered. The shepherds whose voice was not even allowed in court. Now they're getting to bring the best testimony in the world. It is a total upturn of the cart or the expectation. You wouldn't expect a shepherd to do it, and it's important to note that the people doing the testifying, the people heralding the good news, the people going there to the manger, as we say, aren't the prophets. They're not the rabbinic teachers. But they're the shepherds, the ones that no one would have expected or that no one would have heard. And when I read this passage, it catches my foot in the door every time. Because I wonder, who have been the people that I have not listened to because they did not look right? Because they did not fit the model of who I thought would be the authority, or who I thought would have the right information for me, or who I should pay attention to. Because we know the old line, consider the source. Well, at that time, if you'd considered the source, and it was the shepherds, you wouldn't have listened. You know, when I'm walking in Chicago or Kansas City, and a guy has a signboard up telling me the end is near, because of the way he looks, I have a tendency to hurry on past. I've heard some pretty crazy stories at the shelter working on Friday nights, and I tend not always to tune in and listen, but nod my head and say, mm-hmm. But what good news have I missed because I was too proud, or too arrogant, or had too preconceived of a notion of who had news for me? And where in our own lives have we dismissed people that we should have listened to? We all have our polite circles. Should we have listened to someone who shared a different political view? Should we have listened to someone from a different economic strata? Should we have even been willing to listen to someone of a different orientation, or even of a different religion? But we closed them out because they were so different from us. Who does the church need to be listening to? Who's bringing the good news? And if the good news came from an improbable source, would we be willing to listen? Because if it could have been missed once before, it probably could be missed again. And then there is the movement of those shepherds themselves. The angelic visitors come to the shepherds and break into their lives. And make no mistake, it wouldn't have been like anything they would have experienced before. I can't imagine one of the shepherds going, well, as angelic visitations go, the ones in my childhood were a lot better than this one. The voices were stronger, the holy music, it was better. No. This is God breaking in when they are doing their normal, everyday thing. And make no mistake, not only would they have had to have heard that information, and that information would have sounded strange. I'm telling you about the Messiah, the Blessed One. You shall find him in a manger in Bethlehem, wrapped in bands of cloth or swaddling clothes, depending on your translation. The Messiah? You mean isn't the kingly one on a white or black charger swinging a sword? But the Messiah is a tiny, vulnerable baby who can't even sit up, who cries because they're hungry and needs to be fed and suckled on the breast of their mother? You're telling me that image of vulnerability is the Messiah? They would have had to have wrapped their minds around it. And you're telling me the Messiah is not born in a palace with 1,000 attendants, but in a barn in the backwater Bethlehem? Come on. You want me to leave my sheep unprotected to go off telling this wild tale? Come on. Are you sure? And I have to believe if there had only been one shepherd there, maybe they would have taken a pass. Because what we know instinctually is sometimes you need a gathered body to have the strength to do things, even if it seems right. And by extension, sometimes you need a gathered body to do things even if they seem wrong. It's really easy to get a group of people together to vilify other people. But in this case, the shepherds went together to tell this wondrous news. And maybe that's the space of the congregation. Maybe in all of us, we carry a portion of the good news. We carry a portion of the hope. But because it's just our voice, and because our voice seems so small against all of the problems of the world, that we just are afraid to lift that voice. But what if one body came together and said, there is hope, there is love, there is a welcome and an acceptance that isn't just offered by this congregation, but is offered by God, and we as a representative get to offer that same love, welcome, embrace to all who should enter in, to all who should come to our doors. Come, come. Yes, we recognize there are people who are good at pointing out your faults and your failings, but we all know our faults and failings better than anyone else. This is the place where you can come and be welcomed. This is the place where you can come and just be who you are, created and beloved, a child of God, where there are no boundaries and no expectations, other than that you will open yourself to the love of God and be willing to offer that love to others. These shepherds are having to go in a new direction and in a new way. God is doing an unexpected thing with them. And I can't help but wonder when we have allowed God to do unexpected things with us, or if we are even comfortable allowing God to do that. We like God to act in preconceived ways. We even know when we like to come close to God, preferably at 9:30 to about 10:30 or so on Sunday. But what if God wants to be in contact with us on Tuesday? What if God says, instead of just donating to the Shelter of Hope, we need to spend time there on Friday nights? Where do we make the space and time for God to speak to us in unexpected ways? And if God does speak in an unexpected way, do we have the courage to act upon it? What if God asked for this congregation to act in a new and a different way? Would we be convicted enough in that loving and present God to act? Perhaps with the strength of an assembled congregation, we could, just like the shepherds went together as a group. And the shepherds went there, and they told Mary and Joseph what had happened. And we sense, because we've read the Lucan narrative, that Mary and Joseph already had some expectation that Jesus was not just your average child. There had already been some impressive events that had happened in their life. But I think there's a power when someone reaffirms what you know in your heart of hearts, or what you believe, or when you have a third party say, oh, by the way, I understand this, because it speaks to the truth that you already know. Maybe Mary and Joseph needed to hear that. And that's that moment where Mary is depicted as treasuring this and pondering it in her heart. And I wonder if we haven't made room to treasure and ponder this in our heart. I mean, if we think about it just at the prescribed time of year, and I have respect for the church seasons, is that enough? Is this supposed to be something that we think about every day in some small way? The treasure of the Messiah coming as a vulnerable child, the majesty of the least, the last, and the lost very really being lifted up in the story. Because maybe if we don't ponder this, we lose the lessons of the story. And you know the old trope, those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it. Maybe this story isn't just supposed to change us in December. Maybe it's supposed to change us for all of our days. The way we view people, the way we view God, the work of God, the way we are even as church in 2022. Perhaps this is a story for every day, not just an isolated segment of the year. Maybe Mary is inviting us to ponder and treasure all of these words in our hearts every day. Amen. And at this time, we are invited to offer of ourselves, knowing that we have already been gifted by God in abundant and unbelievable ways. Come offering to God in thanksgiving